Hello everyone. In this video, let's take a quick look at the midpoint of a segment. Let's start off with the definition of a midpoint. A midpoint is the point that divides a segment into two congruent pieces. So let's figure out what that's talking about. So let's start with a diagram. So let me draw a segment. Our segment, we have two endpoints. Let's label these as A and B. And now the definition of a midpoint says that the midpoint is the point that divides this exactly into two congruent pieces. So right in the middle, we have another point. We'll call this M, and that point is the midpoint. And it's all right in the name, right? So if we break this word down, the root of the word here is point. That's what we're talking about. It's a point in space. And the prefix mid, well, that just means middle. So M is right in the middle of A and B. So I can say M divides AB into two congruent pieces. So that's what a midpoint does. Now let's talk a little bit about notation. So congruent segments, we can mark those with small tick marks on them. So if M is right in the middle, these two segments have to have the same length. So AM and MB are congruent to each other. So we can mark that with these two little red dashes. Now if I want to write that out and I want to indicate that, I can say that AM, so this is the segment on the left. Okay, AM with the little dash on top, I'm indicating a segment. And then this is congruent to our other segment, MB. Or, since these segments are congruent to each other, the definition of congruent, that also means that they have the same length. So I can also write that AM is equal to MB. And now in this case, here I'm talking about numbers. So without the little dash on top, this is indicating the distance between A and M. So these almost mean the same thing, but one of them is talking about the actual segments, the shapes. The other one is talking about the length of those segments. So now let's see how we can use this. So I have an example. Taking a look at the diagram, we have M is the midpoint. I know this is the midpoint just based on those two little tick marks on the segments. So this is indicating that VM and MW are equal to each other. VM is equal to MW. So that's what those mean. So that establishes an equation pretty quickly for us. And now we can set this up with a little bit of substitution. So VM is being represented by 4x minus 1. And MW is represented by 3x plus 3. So just substituting those in. And now from here, we can just use some algebra to finish this up. So let's subtract 3x from both sides. Let's add 1 to both sides. And we get x is equal to 4. Okay. Now that we know what x is, we can use that to figure out how long each of these segments are. So I can do some back substitution. So I know that VM is represented by this expression, 4x minus 1. Well, now that I know what x is, I can take that and plug it in for x up here. So this is the same as 4 times 4 minus 1. So that means that VM is 16 minus 1, which is 15. Well, because M is the midpoint, if VM is 16, that also means that MW has to be 15 because those two segments are the same. And if those are both 15, the entire length of VW is twice as big as that, so it's 30. Okay, so there's a little bit about the midpoint, just what it is, how we use the notation, and how we can use it to write and solve some equations. Thanks.